I was told in high school I wouldn't amount to anything. People had said, you were unmotivated, or that I was lacked direction or discipline. And it's funny because I see the same people now and I say the same thing about them. But it's funny how time changes things. People had said back then, I wouldn't make anything out of myself. I like to think I made a difference in the world. I don't go around telling myself I'm better than people like they did when they were that age, with the high school thing. I, for as long as I can remember, felt I had something to prove, which is part of why I do what I do. But I reached a point in life where it didn't matter anymore. And then that was part of the reason that I had enlisted with the Air Force and did my 6 years there. And I learned a lot about management and what makes a good leader, a great leader, and developing those sorts of skill sets. What I had found was that when you're around people, especially in a career field like I was with security forces, or as the layperson would call it, military police, what I had learned was it's really more the attitude you carry. For example, we always had leaders that could get a result, but at the same time, is it a sustainable result? Meaning, are your people driven to continue delivering these sorts of results? I feel that as a student in that school of leadership at the time, learning from toxic leadership, learning from things that were really teaching and telling to me of, civilian and military leadership, it really brought me to another level of comprehension to do the kind of work I do now. It's not just agriculture. I mean, when you have a group of people that you drive to a certain result, you have to empower them to bring the best out of them. They have to see what is going to make them great, and they have to be able to see that from the day you start teaching them. And I feel that as a teacher and a student at the same time, because I learn from the people that I teach as well, I feel that that's part of what really makes the whole thing a full experience. When I was in the military, it was funny because it was more of a cycle of bad leader after bad leader after bad leader, and I learned more of what not to be instead of what to be. For instance, they would take on the weekends, they would take you, at 3 a.m. out of your dormitory room, and they would say, everybody's gonna go and do a drug test at 2 or 3 a.m, and they would surprise you and go through all your stuff, and it gave me no confidence in leadership, and it just exactly taught me what not to be. My question was, why could you not do this when I am at work? And if you find some sort of contraband, I wouldn't be hard to find because I was on a military base. I found these things very dehumanizing and defeating of the purpose. It strayed so far from the concept of wanting to defend something because there was just so much bullshit there that it just really wasn't about anything. And that's why I felt more than anything that there was no reason to continue doing that. For me, it was more of the lessons that I needed to be taught of being a leader versus not in their style, but in a style that was more suited to me. If I can come to a place like Mindanao and have the successes that I've had teaching and empowering people and changing my community that I live in, why is it that I feel that it wasn't a wasted experience? I'm really not bitter. I'm not angry. I find a bit of solace in the fact that I got a lot of my failure out young. And I think that if I don't go around, believing my own hype, believing my own bullshit, I don't think I'm great at what I do. I think that I like to be adequate at what I do. I like to be adept and sound in my knowledge. But at the same time, I feel that these are the experiences that made me who I am. And I can honestly say that coming from the Western culture, from that very aggressive sort of go-getting attitude to be driven to success, I am of the mindset that, you know, when you come here, and you bring that here and you try to translate it directly, it's like putting a square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't work. I have come to the understanding through a lot of my experiences that, you know, the people here react to things differently. Of course, obviously, it's a different culture. They're very Americanized here, but at the same time, a lot of my examples of the experiences I've had do directly translate. For instance, when I was in the military, you know, another sign of toxic leadership, that these are things that you learn from. It's not that I harp or dwell on them. More that you would have guys come into the office and just shouting and cursing, and just because they had a bigger piece of stripes on their sleeve than you, and they could just completely dehumanize you and treat you like shit. I mean, they wonder why the depression, suicide rate, alcoholic rates, are so high within the military. It's just because, plain out, they give people positions that don't know how to lead or grow into them. I can say that I was not ready to be a leader when I was in the military. I'm not going to speak like I was so much better than them. It definitely wasn't a really good time in my life. I was still coming into my own, but I understand when someone comes in and they shout at you and really puts you in a position of wondering, you know, how does this whole show keep, you know, on track from day to day? And I found over time, you know, that it's just really a balancing act, and that's not just the military but life in general. And I had been driven to find something else that I could have that same intensity that I originally had for the military, and that, you know, being organic agriculture here in Mindanao, and I find a lot more happiness in that. But at the same time, if history's taught us anything, it's, you know, anything can happen. And in terms of I was told the day that I left the military, basically, that I would never amount to anything. You know, because that's how they keep people, and they make examples out of people that leave, or at least they did in my area. There was really no, you know, you'll be fine out there. I was on my own, and I was doubly on my own coming to the Philippines. And honestly, I was defiant in that aspect. And I didn't need anyone else's solace from the same people that for the last 5-6 years of my life, the same cut of people had treated me like complete shit. And I knew I would be okay. I didn't know how, I didn't know where, I didn't know when. I knew it would be okay. And, you know, I've always believed in my life that if you do the right thing, the right things will happen. And for me, it's more of a learning experience day to day. I had, you know, no real encouragement from those guys, and from a lot of people, you know, I've not gotten a lot of encouragement with hybrid from the same group of people, but look at where they are. I mean, honestly, it's not a bitter thing. It's you look at the cycle of toxicity, and you look at these things that make bad leaders and bad circumstances, and that how they perpetuate themselves, and how that translates to being successful at anything. This isn't one of those shitty, you know, cheap motivational talks that we're having here. It's more of a understanding a concept and how it can work. Not just the concept, but how that concept and idea can become an institution. Be it bad leadership, be it organic agriculture, be it whatever. I mean, when they told me I wouldn't amount to anything, my thing was in 5 years, you know, I'm going to do something great. And in 5 years, you're going to still be here dealing with this bullshit because you need this in your life. And I don't. 5 years later, I've touched thousands of lives. I have been adopted to a tribe as a datu, as a community leader. I've been on TV, which doesn't really matter to me, but it's amplified my work that has helped other people that wish to learn or empower themselves or just be inspired to be better people. And they're still there. And this is something I want people to carry with them. I want them to understand that a lot of this stuff, it's just people talking, blowing air. You know, I never went out to actively seek anybody's approval for anything I did, unless it was legally required. I didn't need some validation from somebody who had put things in perspective, that ultimately put things in perspective and drove me forward. I was just never like that, ever. And honestly, I feel that at this point in my life, that there was a lot that I could have done differently, but I don't regret that. I feel that people ask me for perspectives on things. They ask me, you know, what I think about things, what my take on you know, their life is, or whatever. At the end of the day, it's your life to draw the circle around. For me, I chose to take the perspective of being a realist, which a lot of times is a negative perspective because of the bad things that are in this world. But drawing my own circle that is my life from there. I mean, I grew beyond my circumstance. I never had the discipline in the beginning. And the discipline, to tell you the truth, the discipline is great. But if you don't have a direction to take it, and then what does it mean? I mean, to kind of expound on that, when you have a idea that you're trying to put out, you can take examples of civilizations, of great civilizations, of great businesses, of great things that have happened in the world, and they just fell flat. I mean, look at the World War II, Germany. You had a group of people who had a personality cult issue basically amongst them, struggling for power to get to Hitler. And, you know, it just became, you had Jodl, you had Dönitz, you had Göring, you had all of these people who were trying to put their ideas in. And obviously, aside from the extreme evil that was going on, I'm looking at this from a governmental, moving a whole people forward perspective, not necessarily an atrocity perspective. It destroyed everything. It was the same in the military on a smaller scale. And you know, I'm not comparing the Holocaust. That's not what I'm referencing here. What I'm saying is that it was more of a, my idea is better than yours, but there was no practicality to it. It was just more of a personality thing. So when the personality changes the direction, then the discipline can be everything. But if the direction's been skewed, then your idea's lost course. It's just something like that. And for me, I've been around a lot of great minds, seen a lot of great minds. And I've seen a lot of people self-sabotage because they set traps for themselves because they doubt themselves. And at the end of the day, it's on you. It's what you want to do. I've been asked questions hundreds of times about things outside of agriculture, in terms of people have asked me to do motivational talks, and I'm like, why? I'm not a billionaire. I don't want to be a billionaire. I don't think that I would really motivate people in that aspect, I guess. It's more of for me, it's more of a, how do I say this? A self-empowerment through basically proving that your own things work. You start at the bottom and build your pyramid up. And I think that from the foundation up, with the discipline and direction. In terms of leadership, I just believe that you empower your people. You give them what they need. And, you know, you can't hold on to people forever. And that's what a lot of leaders lose track of, is that, you know, people are going to go on. Life's like a river. People keep going down the river. If you treat your people right, you know, eventually that river comes back around. It may help you. It's a small world. Some crazy stuff happens. But it's really crazy that people, you know, wouldn't learn from their mistakes, or that, a simple act of doing right by somebody could actually have very, very adverse consequences in a good way, not always a bad way. And at the end of the day, I feel that the biggest and best thing that we can do as people is just pay it forward. In terms of leadership, because that's the thing. That's where it all comes back to is, will you take ownership of your situation and accept that? I had nothing to my name when I left the military. And I had no direction. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was an alcoholic. I couldn't think straight. When you have a group of people just constantly fucking with you, and I didn't let it break me, but at the time it was just like, you have this thing where you're just shit on relentlessly, and people ridicule you no matter what you do, no matter how you try to innovate. And to be honest with you, looking back at it, it really tempered my resolve. It made me. And I can't say that I regret the experience at all, because to put it in perspective, you go in, a lot of the military police shops will work, 12, 14 hours. You get caught sleeping, you're probably gonna either lose rank or you may even go to jail, depending on where it is and what resource you're protecting. And when you get out, usually, I was in Korea for a time, there's just copious amounts of booze when I was there 10 years ago. And there was one time I drank 5 bottles of wine in a night, and I was pretty messed up. And, it's just the circumstances that breed that. And, when you get treated like shit, we have a really high suicide rate in our career field in the Air Force. And that whole party culture is definitely a thing. And basically, more or less, what happens is that, you get treated like shit, and then when you go to the convenience store, the exchange store on the base, it's like pick your poison. They just have a wall like 8 feet tall of booze without tax, and your cigarettes don't have tax, and you can just go there and get your thing and go home and get drunk. And that's what it was back then. And for me, that culture was very telling. And looking back at it, I'm just looking at it with a neutral perspective. For some, that's how a lot of people coped that I was around. And for some people, it wasn't how they coped. I'm not generalizing or bashing. I'm just saying that this was my reality back then. And when I came out of that, it was like coming back into a world where it was black and white in the military. You do this, you go to jail. You do this, you get rewarded. And that was skewed by the personality of bad leaders at times, and in very rare instances, good leaders who rewarded good behavior. This tempered a very different resolve for me in terms of how to lead people, how to change the community and the world at large around me. And I feel that in my infinite wisdom back then, and I say that sarcastically, that everything was hopeless and I didn't know what I was going to do, and I felt that I could only exist being in the military. But by the time I got to Guam, and I had been around a bit, and I still was, to a pretty decent extent, caught within the same system, by my last 3 months in the military, I just said, fuck all this. I'm 90 days out. I got my honorable discharge. I'm done. I just quit giving a shit. Because I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. And at that point, I walked on. And I think more people need to understand, in terms of developing their self, that the power to walk away is a very, very liberating thing. That there are times you need to walk away from things. And in a business deal sense, I had a great offer for a great job in Canada. And the person I work with, Honey, who's the other part of Team Hybrid, who has been very crucial in developing the content you guys see, was openly being abused in front of me. And it comes down to morals and ethics. Are you going to stand up and do the right thing? And the thing I'm thankful for the military for is that black and white resolve of saying that I'm going to do the right thing when I'm questioned. I'm not a perfect person. I never said I was better than anybody. I didn't say I was great. I'm not greater than anybody. But I know that when I'm pushed to do the right thing, I will. I can tell you that I heard things that should not be uttered to any other human, especially in a quote unquote so-called professional work environment. And for me, I had come to expect something different from the Western world, and I hear Westerners put down, the Philippines or Eastern countries for being third world or primitive, and it's just like they're doing the same shit, even worse. So, but that's another story for another day. I had said, I learned from this enabled, this enabled crutch of toxic leadership through just basically a culture of bullshit that, I'm going to say no this time. I'm going to break the cycle. Honey came home and we're doing the hybrid thing here and everybody's doing well, all things considered. But from a learning perspective, what did we come out of this with? Are we better people? I like to think we are. I like to think that we have touched the world in a certain way. And to be honest, I feel that I'm in a better place than I was then. These are the things, these are the ties that bind. These are the things that people who wish to make a difference in the world in any way, it doesn't have to be agriculture. These are the things that people have to come to understand. That there's going to be times that you have to swim against the current. And guess what? I swam against the current and I'm doing just fine. I walked away from a very well-paying job in Canada. I could not take dirty money from a dirty person. Doing the right thing will open doors for you. And you may not see it today, you may not see it tomorrow, hell, you may not see it next month or next year. It will happen. If you stay in the game, it'll happen. If you're driven, if you love what you do, it shows in your results and the product you put out. If you treat your people well, they'll treat you well. It's just, these are the basic fundamentals. But I was from a system that is, look at the veterans, look at the jobless veterans, look at the unemployed, look at the homeless veterans, look at the situation in the States. If anybody wants to debate the culture that the military puts on people upon their exit, it's undeniable. Look at the statistics. So I wasn't going to be a victim of that because I own my fate. And I told myself that the day I started hybrid, I own my fate, not anyone else. I'm the master and driver of my own ship, of my own fate, of my own destiny. And I refuse to let anyone else take credit for that. I had seen all of these things happen and unfold before my eyes. Now I ask you, I didn't need to go into the specifics of every situation, but I ask you, what can you do to put your situation in perspective? What can you do to set the ball in motion going the other direction if you feel that you can't do anything with your life? These are questions I'm going to bounce back on all of you. Consider where you're at, what you want to do, where you're going, why you're there. Think about why you started, whatever it is you're doing with your life. It's just questions, rhetorical, whatever. Consider these things, because I was told I'd never amount to anything. I proved a lot of people wrong, and I'm still proving them wrong, and I still have a lot of wrong proving for a lot of people on this planet. Let that be one of your things, but don't make it everything. Let your results speak for you. I mean, that's what I was always told. I like to think that I'm better than, the situation of being toxic and like the leaders that I saw. Yes, there was discipline, but there was no positive direction.